welcome to episode number 22 of Abbott and Costello Meet the Podcast. The Noose Hangs High. I'm Jerry Shario, and it is, as usual, my privilege to introduce to you actor, director, playwright, musician, composer, co-author of the book that kind of sparked this whole thing, The Annotated Abbott and Costello, the man about whom William Shatner once said, "He's good, but he's no Benny Biffle." Here's Nick Santamaria.
Shatner is right on the money, isn't he? He's right on the money. As good an actor as he is, he's better as a man full of adages. This is episode 22.
Yes, it is.
Which happens to be the number of the house I grew up in, 22 Notting Hill Drive. And we had some of the craziest people on Long Island on that street, and it was dubbed Nutty Hill Drive. That was on purpose. But anyway, that's here nor there. I won't go into the story about my across the street neighbor who actually moved to Florida and was eaten by her dogs. But that's for another time. Anyway, this is... It's true. It's very true. But anyway, that's just part of the craziness from Nutty Hill Drive. And today we are discussing a film that happens to be their very first independent venture. In fact, the newly formed Abbott and Costello Productions was the main producer of this film. But I just want to start and say, Jerry, are you feeling better today?
I am, sir.
On our last episode, you were a bit congested. You sounded a bit like C. Aubrey Smith. Yeah.
And now a portion of our listeners are rapidly looking up who C. Aubrey Smith is. Yes, I am feeling much better.
Actually wrote and thanked me for that inspiration. Go ahead.
I am feeling much better. Things have cleared up. The rest of my house, however, is still suffering the after effects, because we're a good family. We share everything in this house.
You do, including illness.
Exactly. So my son is still trying to get over it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, if your son were taller, you'd have trouble getting over him.
Exactly.
So, but that's, again, that's here nor there. So I'm happy to hear you're feeling better.
Thank you.
And things are hunky-dory here. So let's get on with our podcast about this wonderful film. This is one of those films, I was telling Jerry before we started recording, it was one of those films that did not show up on the on the rotation in New York, where I grew up in New York. And it was not part of the MGM Universal package until I was in my early teens, when they started showing Abbott and Costello at 11:30 every Sunday morning. All of a sudden, this showed up. Now, I had read about it in Jim Mulholland's great book, the Abbott and Costello book, but still had no idea what it was or why it was or whatever. It was a totally alien title to me. And all of a sudden, it showed up on the rotation, and it turned out to be one of their best films. I mean... and reading up on it is just amazing that it turned out that way, because it was their first independent film, the first that they were somewhat responsible for. Now, first I want to talk to you about the title, and I want to ask you, Jerry, do you know what that means? The Noose Hangs High?
I will be totally honest with you saying, no, I did not know the derivation until I read this wonderful book called The Annotated Abbott and Costello.
Oh, it has it in there. Yes, it does. Yes. And I have to give credit to my co-writer, Matthew Conium, who actually did the research on this title. And I have to tell you, for years, since I first encountered this film, I thought The Noose Hangs High was almost like a warning. It's like it's a painful drop. The higher the noose, the more painful the drop as you die. You know what I mean? So I thought this was a real harbinger of disaster. But it has nothing to do with that, it turns out. It is a pun on an old saying, the goose hangs high. And what does that mean? It means that geese fly higher in good weather. So things are fine. It's the exact opposite of what I thought it was. So it's The Goose Hangs High. Well, anyway, so an interesting thing, because their other independent movie, or another one they came up with, Africa Screams, is also a spoof on a movie that was made almost 20 years before, called Africa Speaks. So 20 years later, they do a pun on Africa Screams. Now, who remembers? Who remembers a movie 20 years ago? There was no television. They didn't show them on the radio because there was,
that would be
there
hard.
was a lack of monitor. So anyway, I just think that's very funny. And The Goose Hangs High. It sounds like something that, like Ben Franklin came up with during the Revolutionary War. Like a lot of Abbott and Costello's jokes. So that's what the title means. It is a spoof on The Goose Hangs High. And here's what they did. Abbott and Costello negotiated a contract, a brand new contract with Universal at this point. And not only were there participation points involved, they limited their budgets to $750,000 to $800,000. That was the limit. And if they got in under 800,000, they made a certain percentage of the profits. If they made it under 750, they got even more. And above everything else, they got like 10% of, once the movie started making money. So they made a fortune on this film. So what did they do? They went to a company called Eagle Lion. Now, Eagle Lion, if you're a film noir buff, as I am, they made some wonderful film noirs during their very short life. Eagle Lion came from J. Arthur Rank, the very famous British producer. I love his last name, Rank. Just goes against everything that he tried to, build up.
Exactly. You say this is a rank production. It just doesn't give you confidence,
Exactly. This thing is rank. So anyway, J. Arthur Rank decided that he wanted to create a company that would release British films to the United States while also producing and funding American films. So it would be part British, part American, thus Eagle, America, Lion, British. So there you go. That's where it's from. They also bought up PRC, Producers Releasing Corporation, along with Monogram, one of the ubiquitous low-budget studios working. So that was all a big conglomeration, and it didn't last, unfortunately. This movie turned out to be one of their big money makers during the, I guess, 2 to 4 years they were in business. This was a biggie, but unfortunately, they made the decision not to put much money into it. So they went to other producers and all of that. So they shot themselves in the foot and eventually found themselves out of business. But anyway, while they were in business, they did some fine work. T-Men is a great film noir movie. I can't think of some of the others, but still really, really good stuff. Mm-hmm. Now, Abbott and Costello decided that they were going to borrow people from Universal, so it would make their path much easier. Yeah. So right away, they borrowed Charlie Barton, the director, Milton Feld, a producer at Universal, and Charles Van Enger, their great DP, their director of photography. So really good people, great people behind the production itself. Unfortunately, Milton Feld passed away just weeks before production began. And in tribute to him, Lou made sure that there were associate producers credits for his widow, Shirley Feld, and for his mom, also, Lolly Cristillo. So that Lou was very into making people feel special, hearing their names or reading their names. He got a kick out of that. Yeah. A little immature, I might say, but kind of fun. It's him. This is him. I'm sure his mom got a big kick out of seeing her name on the screen. And Mrs. Feld must have felt much better. So anyway, that's the production side. So Charlie Barton took over the producer chores from Mr. Feld, the late Mr. Feld. And as far as writers, this movie was a remake. This movie was originally made as For Love of Money by Universal in 1939. It starred June Lang, Robert Kent, and Ed Brophy, the great roly-poly character actor. So that was the original.
Okay.
And Universal started in 1945 adapting it for Abbott and Costello. But it didn't go anywhere. It just kind of sat there. Bud and Lou knew about it and bought it from Universal to make their first independent film out of it. I guess they knew a good script when they didn't read it. I'm sure somebody explained it to them. But it turned out to be a really, really good thing because it was a B movie in 1939. It was a B movie. But they had the peace of mind to know that this would really work well for Bud and Lou. Yeah. And sure enough, it did. The writers, Howard Harris and John Grant, went to work on the adaptation, and they put it together. And Howard Harris, born in 1912, passed away in 1986. But he worked on some interesting things and was involved in a very, very important television creation. He worked on Copacabana for Groucho and Carmen Miranda, that Groucho's first solo film. He also wrote for television. Now, I'm going to leave the last one, the best one, for last. He wrote for years, actually. He wrote on You Bet Your Life for Groucho Marx. You know that show? He ad-libbed everything. Yeah. Howard Harris was there for about 5 or 6 years, and he was one of many. He also wrote like a Gilligan's Island episode. I mean, he was around. He was around. He was considered a big radio comedy man. He wrote for Joe Penner. Right? Want to buy a duck? He wrote for Fred Allen. It doesn't get better than that.
Oh, yeah.
And here's the biggie. He actually wrote for the Jackie Gleason show early on, and he helped develop a thing called The Honeymooners. He wrote 14 of the original sketches that became The Honeymooners, eventually, TV show. Yes, so he was in on that. Howard Harris, he had quite a pedigree, I would say. And he was working right along John Grant. And if you can't find John Grant's work in this movie, then you are definitely not paying attention. Because it's all here. It's all here. I don't think they made a movie that had more burlesque sketches in it.
I agree.
And one is done more beautifully than the next. It's just Abbott and Costello being Abbott and Costello, and that's all you need. Yep. So we have Howard Harris and John Grant supplying a wonderful script. And I would love to see the original. I'm not quite sure where to find it, but I would love to see For Love of Money.
I have to say that one of the first things I noticed in watching it this time through was the fact that there are 7 names listed under the writing credit. And of course, it makes perfect sense. It was adapted from, it was a remake from a previous film. So you have to include those people plus the new guys and then the final. Yeah. Exactly. But I don't think there's another Abbott and Costello film that can boast a list that long in the writing credits.
I agree. Oh, they did do It Ain't Hay, I believe, was a remake, but I don't think there were that many writers working on it. On this one, you had 3 original writers just for the story. And then you had 2 regular staff writers. One of them, Arthur Horman, who wrote for, the early Abbott and Costello. He worked on it. And then eventually you had the guys who adapted it for the modern remake. So it does have quite a list of writers on this film. Now, I think it's very interesting, the opening credits to this. And I don't know if you noticed this or not. It's kind of hard not to.
Yes.
It looks like Lou gets top billing. Now, I'm not sure if this is on purpose. I'm not sure if Lou asked for it. I'm not sure what the deal was, but here it is. I was reminded that this first happened on Towering Inferno between Paul Newman and Steve McQueen, and they pretty much figured it the same way. In this Abbott and Costello movie, it opens with a caricature. They play window cleaners, so they're on skyscraper. And their caricatures are there, and Bud's is low down in the left-hand corner, pretty much, and Lou is up on the right upper-hand corner. So when the names are shown, Bud is in his normal position on the left, but he's lower down. Lou is on the right in his normal position, second, but his name is higher. So this became, Abbott and Costello must have created this because this became the norm later on for people who were pretty much the same status, stardom-wise. So I find that very interesting. It's a little jarring too. It's
Yes.
almost like, did Lou ask for this? I don't know.
Yes, it did take me by surprise when I first saw it, and knowing previous discussions I've had about other films of the period, billing was not something that just happens.
No, never.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody had their own way of presenting themselves or wanting to be presented.
Mm-hmm.
I know that like Bing Crosby never liked being above the title alone. You know what I mean? He always said that if the movie turns out terrible, I don't want to be the one that everyone's going to point to. I want to be among everybody. So he had his own set of rules. So anyway, we have the opening credits. This is maybe the most unusual opening of any Abbott and Costello movie. It sort of begins in the middle, it seems.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And interestingly, it's almost shot for shot, scene for scene of a scene they did later in the television series, in the film television series. Lou has a toothache, and you can tell he's got the comedy trope handkerchief tied around his cheeks with his little hat on over it. And he has a brilliant idea on how to get his tooth out of his mouth. Now, I have to give them credit here, because there could have been a whole opening sequence that isn't necessary about, oh, my tooth hurts. Well, what should I do? Maybe if I tie this on, blah. No, it starts in the middle, and we don't need to know anything else. Obviously, he's been up all night with this horrible tooth, and he's come up with a great idea. So he ties a string on the bad tooth. He ties the other end of the string to a dog's collar. And next to the dog is a cat in a cage. So all he has to do is open the cage, let the cat run. The dog runs after the cat and pulls out the tooth. Unfortunately, we're talking about Lou Costello. The best laid plans. It turns out that the dog just drags him along. He crashes into a wooden fence a couple of times. He's at the dog's mercy, let me put it that way. And finally, he ends up actually smashing the doghouse, and he still has his tooth. So it doesn't work, and it's a very funny scene, a lot of action, and of course, Lou is just great. But anyway, it does not solve his tooth problem. So we cut to, and this is interesting too, because Bud is hard at work. Again, another jarring thing that just sort of set me back on my heels, It turns out that Bud and Lou are window cleaners, and they work for a company called Speedy Service. And Bud is up there on his thing, and you see him hook up his safety harness onto the clips, that they supply at each window. And he's busy cleaning the windows, and he's Bud Abbott, hard worker, I'm going to clean these windows. Oh my. But then Lou comes out, and we don't see him hook up his safety harness to the little clips by the window. He forgets. And in the meantime, he's on the edge of this skyscraper, and of course they're about 90,000 stories high. They have that same typical, as they look down, you see the people look like ants. Some of them look like uncles, but it's hard to see. But anyway, that's the theory of relativity. But so it's the in-law bylaws. Yeah. So anyway, he's up there, and loses his shoe, and he's got to put his shoe on. And to make it easier, he steps up on his bucket, which is even more precarious on this thin ledge. It's absolutely great. And I have to say that the mat work mixed up with the rear projection, and then seeing Bud and Lou on the building, it's all put together in one shot. And I think it looks great. I think it looks just great. So Lou is trying to get ready and blah, blah, blah. And finally, Bud just looks at him and says, you know what? I'm getting tired of you complaining about that tooth. We're going to get it pulled. Come on, there's a dentist in the building. So Lou comes back through the window, back into the building, and there's a wonderful moment where he stops and picks up his safety harness clips and thinks, did I hook myself up? Because he just did all these gymnastics, that you would do probably if you were hooked up, but he just doesn't remember hooking it up. And he just sort of, sloughs it off and heads to the dentist with Bud. Now, one of my all-time favorite Bud Abbott moments in his entire career comes up at this moment when they walk into the dentist's office, and Lou is behind him, and Bud walks right up to the nurse and says, I want a tooth pulled. I don't want any anesthetic. I don't care about pain. I just want it pulled. And the lady says, okay, can you show me the tooth? And he pulls Lou in front of him and says, show him the tooth. So in true Bud Abbott tradition, he sets Lou up for a horrible time. So they sit down. Did you notice the W.C. Fields gag?
Yes.
Right? It's right out of the dentist.
Oh my gosh, yes. The Dentist has always been one of my favorite of Fields' shorts.
Oh,
and so,
mine too. It's
first
wild.
time I watched this, I went, wait a minute.
Yeah, Lou walks in. He takes off his hat very gingerly, hangs it on the hat rack, and sits down very quietly. Suddenly you hear a blood-curdling scream from the dentist's office, and Lou very calmly stands up, goes to the hat rack, puts on his hat, and starts to leave. He does it really well, too.
Oh, yes.
And Bud grabs him by the seat of the pants and pulls him back. So anyway, the lady comes out who had screamed, and of course her face is all bandaged up and everything. So Bud, in true Bud Abbott fashion, says, I'll be sitting over here. You go work. you work 2 days more than I do. So Lou goes into the dental office, and who do we find as the dentist? Murray Leonard, who is now in his third or fourth movie with the boys since he came to Hollywood. I believe he might have been living at Bud's place while he was getting situated. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure this is number 4. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. And he's wonderful here. He is just absolutely out of his mind. Wonderful. First, he puts on Shemp-Howard Coke bottle glasses, of course, so he can't see anything. I love when he's looking for where the tooth is painful, and he's hitting Lou's chin with his fingers, and it sounds like a drum solo. And Lou's finally like, what are you doing? It's over here. He hits it, and of course he hurts himself. He puts the bib around his head. In essence, Lou becomes Rags Ragland from Abbott and Costello in Hollywood. When Rags comes in for the haircut and Lou is in charge, now it's Lou who's the victim. So it's very funny. He needs help. He puts Lou's hand up by his chin and thinks he's pulling the tooth, and instead he gets Lou's finger. He's like, look at this, I've got it, roots and all. He actually pulls the tooth by accident. Wait, there's one joke that I can't let go because it's one that I missed until maybe 6 months ago when I watched this movie last.
Oh.
He pulls out the drill, which looks horrifying. It looks like he's drilling for oil. And Lou says, what are you going to do with that? And he says, I'm going to drill. And he goes, not in my mouth. You're going to march. I'm going to drill. You're not going to march in my mouth. So yeah, I just think that's my kind of humor. I really like that stuff. And it was a real throwaway too, Oh,
very.
The both of them in this movie, the acting is really good, and it's very underplayed.
Mm-hmm.
More than usual, because they have more than usual plot to deal with. And there's a lot at stake in this plot. Their lives are at stake.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were very fine performances, I have to say. So anyway, the wonderful ending to this dentist scene is that the dentist is so thrilled that he pulled his first tooth, and he's talking about getting his diploma. And he's jumping up and down. He's so happy, but he's hitting the hydraulic button that sends the chair up in the air. So he sends Lou all the way up to the ceiling, and his head goes through the ceiling and is sticking out in the office above them. Just his head. And it just so happens to be a psychiatrist's office. and he's in the middle of an examination of a lady, and of course he sees the head, and he has to excuse himself to go see his psychiatrist, and the lady screams and faints, and we get a wonderful close-up of Lou with his head through the floor. Now, I have to talk about someone who actually was a buddy of mine, and his name was Fritz Feld.
Oh,
you love Fritz Feld, we all do, and
yes.
He does the pop, with his hand on his mouth. Usually played head waiters or psychiatrists or things like that. Fritz and I used to go to funerals together. He loved going to funerals because he saw a lot of his old friends were there, the ones that were still living.
Yeah.
And I got involved, and I went to like 3 or 4 with him, and we would sit together and laugh and, just really have a good time. He was a wonderful little guy. He loved being recognized and all that. But let me tell you a little bit about him. He was born in 1900 in Berlin, Germany. His real name was Fritz Falkenfeld. Fritz Falkenfeld, a Jewish family in Germany. Not a good combination.
Yeah.
He made his film debut in 1917 in Germany, one of the Golem films. That was really the first horror franchise, was out of Germany, the Golem. He was in the Golem and the Dancing Girl, and then also in the subsequent one. He moved to the States in the 1920s, did a lot of theater. Then when he went to Hollywood, he got a job directing the sound sequences for Cecil B. DeMille's film, The Godless Girl, 1929. DeMille was supposed to direct, but he got a contract with MGM and he left Pathé. And because he left, the work wasn't finished. So they hired Fritz to direct part of Cecil B. DeMille's film, and he was always very proud of that. The Pop was first shown in 1948, the same year this film was made. In fact, just before this film. And it was If You Knew Susie, featuring the dynamic love couple of Eddie Cantor and Joan Davis. I say romantic couple because they really were having an affair. They had one for a few years, actually. I used to do an imitation of them in bed for my friends, but I won't do that now. Now, Joni. Well, anyway, I won't do it.
Oh my gosh!
But he shows up in movies, bringing up Baby. He's very memorable as the psychiatrist. He's great in At the Circus with the Marx Brothers as Jardinier. And he's the reason for probably the best ending they ever had to one of their films. Jardinier and his orchestra going out to sea. He did, and this is where he deserves probably a Medal of Honor. What's the highest you can get? Is Congressional Medal of Honor? Is that what it is?
Yes.
Yeah. He did 9 Jerry Lewis movies. So he's in line for that. His last movies were Barfly in 1987 with Mickey Rourke. And the other one was Homer and Eddie in 1989. He worked quite a bit. Think about that. That's 72 years he was in the business. Yeah. Incredible. Married to Virginia Christine, who was Mrs. Folger in the Mrs. Folger coffee ads. Married from 1940 until he passed away in 1993.
I have to say, one of my fondest memories of Fritz Feld is from Mel Brooks' silent movie, where he's playing the maitre d' at the restaurant. He does the gesture for the pop, and then the title card comes up on the screen. It says, "Pop." It's just wonderful.
There were some clever things in that movie, I have to say. It eventually turned out to be like a sketch movie. It was like each star had their own sketch to do. But I love that Harry Ritz had a little moment there in the tailor shop. Okay, so where are we?
Fritz Feld, yes.
Yeah, so Fritz Feld, he was the psychiatrist, a very funny scene. Yeah, we love Fritz. So what happens after that? Afterwards, Nick Craig spots them in the hallway wearing their Speedy service clothing. He calls them over. Now, Nick Craig is I don't want to call him a gangster because he's not, I guess he is. He's a bookie. Yeah, he's a shady kind of bookie, and he's got a couple of goons working for him. But he notices Bud and Lou wearing their Speedy service clothing, and their names in this movie are really weird. Ted and Tommy. That's what they could come up with. Ted and Tommy? Hey, Ted, what is it, Tommy? No, sorry. It should be like Slicker and Fatso. It's like. But anyway, Nick Craig, played by the wonderful Joseph Calleia.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I have to tell you about Joseph. I'm sorry, but he's wonderful in this movie. He really is wonderful in this movie, and he's one of those villains that you kind of like. It's like he really was put upon, by the guys. The guys lost his money, and he's threatened because he doesn't have the money. So I kind of feel for him, in this movie. He's not entirely bad. But anyway, Joe Calleia was his real name, Joseph Alexander Caesar Herstal Vincent Calleia.
Wow.
Yeah, during school when they would call the roll, school was over by the time they called him. He was born in Malta, on the island of Malta. He was Maltese.
Okay.
And he started out as a singer and an opera singer. He did concerts and arias and all of that. He served in World War I with honors with the British Transport Service. Went to the U.S. eventually, starred in musical comedies, mostly singing. Again, he supposedly had a beautiful voice. And then he started getting roles in Broadway shows, and some legendary Broadway shows. One was called Broadway. That was in 1926. This one I know you know, The Front Page, in 1928. He was in The Last Mile, which was the show that made a star out of Gable, Clark Gable. And that was 1930. Then he was in the Broadway version of Grand Hotel in 1930. And eventually he became a star in a villainous role in a play called Small Miracle in 1934. It was a big hit. MGM took notice and signed him to a contract. He played mostly villains, like he did in his first film, Public Hero #1 in 1935. He was Dancer in After the Thin Man, the second Thin Man movie. He made some wonderful films, and he wasn't always a villain. He was great in Algiers in 1938, a movie called Five Came Back. Ever see that, Jerry?
I have not seen it, but I am familiar with it. Yeah.
Oh, you have to see it. It's just incredible. He plays again, a gangster, but he's kind of a hero at the end. You'll love it. It's really, really terrific. Shows up on TCM all the time. He's in Golden Boy with William Holden in 1939. The remake of The Glass Key in 1942. He's great in that. He's in Gilda with Rita Hayworth, and he's the good guy in that. He's also in My Little Chickadee as the bad guy, the bandit. And I understood that Humphrey Bogart was originally cast in that role, but couldn't do it. Turns out he couldn't do it, so Joe Calleia went in for him. Did a lot of touring for the USO, and then I have to say that I think his greatest role was in Touch of Evil with Orson Welles. He plays his devoted assistant. It's almost a love story.
Yeah.
And then when he finds out little by little how corrupt his partner is, it's a beautiful acting performance. It really is. So anyway, Joe Calleia, just fantastic, passed away at the age of 78 in 1975. So he is Nick Craig, and he tells the boys, listen, I owe J.C. McBride, who he's never met before, he's only on the phone, he owes him $50,000. In today money, that's about $708,000, almost $1 million. He says he'll give the boys $50 apiece if he goes to collect the money from another gangster who happens to have an office in the same building and bringing it back to him. So he would give them each $50. Now, I wrote down here what $50 was worth at that time, and it's $733.97 in today money.
Okay.
Yeah. Later on, he offers them $100 apiece. Remember that? So just double that. That's $1,500. So anyway, Bud and Lou are like, oh, yeah, we'll do it. Even though they know he's really looking for somebody from the Speedy Messenger Service. Yeah. So they lie to him, but they want the $50. So they figure, we'll go get the money. We'll bring it back to him. We're $50 richer. Okay. So they go, and it's the always suspect Ben Weldon.
Yes.
Ben Weldon, what was it? Lemon Louie in Superman. He was
Yes.
Lemon Louie. Oh
Lemon
God, he
Louie,
was.
yeah.
I think of him as the smiling killer. He smiles. He's a villain who smiles all the time, and it's scary. It really is scary because he'll sooner put a bullet in your head as he does smile. But anyway, he's got two goons. One of them is Joe Kirk, Mr. Bachagaloop,
Yeah.
and the other one is Matt Willis, another tall goon. So anyway, this is what happens. They go to Ben Weldon's office. Ben tells them to wait outside in the outer office, and he tells his goons to follow them and get the money back and do whatever you have to do to get the money back. Okay, so that leaves it wide open.
Yeah.
In the meantime, they have the intercom on in the other office, and they're hearing all this. Lou thinks it's an episode of The Green Hornet. It takes forever for him to go astray of that idea. And Bud realizes what's really going on. They're in trouble. Their lives are in trouble. So here's what they decide to do. And this is very clever. Mm-hmm. In the office building is an advertising company. And what this is, and I'll try and follow this, it's a ladies' powder product. And what they would do is they would mail samples of this product to people in the area, as a sales promotion. So what that means is they take a small envelope, put the powder in it, seal up the small envelope, put it in a larger envelope, and address the larger envelope to the people that are getting it. Okay? So Bud's idea is put the money in the smaller envelope, then into the larger envelope, and address it to Nick Craig, and it'll get there tomorrow morning. Okay? Because he knows those goons are outside waiting to kill them. So that's what happens. So they go to see Nick. They tell him what they did. Nick is not pleased, but he understands. And he says, you guys stay here tonight in case the money does not show up. I want you at arm's length. I want you there. So they have to sleep in Nick Craig's office. They leave one person to guard them, and that person just happens to be another one of my favorite actors, a great type, and that's Mike Mazurki.
Yep.
I know several people out there smile just hearing the name, Mike Mazurki, that big lug. Get this now. He was born on Christmas Day in 1907 in the Ukraine.
Oh.
Markian Ulyanovich Mazurkovich is his real name.
Wow.
He didn't want to change it until he got a hernia carrying his driver's license. So he changed it to Mike Mazurki. Interesting guy. Now, everybody thinks of Mike Mazurki as like this big dumb guy. He was anything but. One of my girlfriend's father was a friend of his and said he was very intelligent and very, very sweet, a kind man. Mm. They moved to the U.S. when he was still young. He graduated high school in Troy, New York, upstate. He went to Manhattan College and got his BA there. He played football there, basketball. Then he went to law school, and he graduated from Fordham Law School and became an attorney.
Wow.
Are we following this? Can you imagine showing up at the courthouse knowing that you're against Mike Mazurki? He's 6'5", like 240 pounds. And no, I would not argue. I was, okay, I'd like to just dismiss this case. God, Mike Mazurki. So anyway, he loved sports, and he realized that he could be a great wrestler and make 3 times the money he was making as an attorney. Mm-hmm. Attorneys didn't make as much money as they do today, believe me. So anyway, he becomes a wrestler. And during that time, he goes to Hollywood. He becomes a bodyguard for Mae West. Mae West puts him in Belle of the 90s, one of her last pre-code movies. Actually, I think it just made it over the code, directed by Leo McCarey. And Mike did uncredited roles in films, very tiny roles, up until Joseph von Sternberg gave him his first credited part. And that was in a movie called The Shanghai Gesture in 1941. And that started a whole career for Mike Mazurki. If you needed a big, tough gangster type, didn't have to look much further than Mike Mazurki.
Yeah.
One of his best roles was as Moose Malloy in Murder, My Sweet with Dick Powell. That was in 1944. He was looking for Velma, right? Wasn't it? Velma.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Velma. He played Splitface in Dick Tracy in 1945 with my friend Ann Jeffries. One of my favorite performances is one that's not as well known, but it's a movie called Night and the City. It was remade, I think, in the 90s with Robert De Niro, I think it was. But the original is fantastic. Richard Widmark is the star, and Mike Mazurki plays a wrestler named the Strangler, and he's very scary. And then, of course, I think the movie he's most known for would be Some Like It Hot, as one of George Raft's tough guys. We was at Rigoletta's. So Mike Mazurki is there to watch over the fellas.
Yeah.
And they do a routine that they did back in Rio Rita. Now, I say back in Rio Rita. It was, 6 years ago?
Yeah.
But I'm sure the public did not remember it, because we have to remember these movies were not, we didn't watch them in a bunch like we do now.
Yeah.
So anyway, they do You're Not Here. And Bud does it with Mike Mazurki. Now, what I find interesting about this scene is that they don't change the camera angle on Bud and Mike as they do this routine. Now, if you know this routine, Bud bets him $10 that he's not here. Mike is like, of course I'm here. What are you talking about? And it's the old thing. You're not in Philadelphia. No. You're not in Chicago. No. You're not in St. Louis. No. Well, if you're not in Philadelphia, Chicago, or St. Louis, you must be someplace else. And if you're someplace else, you can't be here. And he takes the money, right? So Mike Mazurki looks at it and he thinks, oh my gosh, that's great. I got to try that. Does the little guy know about this? And Bud's like, no, are you kidding? He doesn't know. So Lou is trying to sleep on the couch, and Mike wakes him up to place this bet with him. Now, it works out where Lou turns it around on him. In fact, we could probably play that for you.
Now, I'm going to prove to you that you're not here. Go ahead. Now, you're not in Chicago, are you?
No, sir, but I got an anthem.
No, you're not in Chicago, are you?
No, sir.
And you're not in St. Louis?
No, sir.
And you're not in Philadelphia?
No, sir.
Now, if you're not in Chicago, and you're not in St. Louis, and you're not in Philadelphia, then you must be someplace else.
That's right.
And if you're someplace else, you're not here.
Yes. That's right.
Hey, give me back my money.
Who took your money?
That's my money.
Who took your money?
You did.
I took your money?
That's right.
Now, just a minute, big boy.
Yeah.
Didn't you say that I wasn't in Chicago?
That's right.
That I wasn't in Philadelphia?
Yeah.
And that I wasn't in St. Louis?
That's right.
Well, if I'm not in Chicago, St. Louis, or Philadelphia, I must be someplace else.
That's right.
Well, if I'm someplace else, I couldn't be here. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Well, if I'm not here, how could I take your money?
But I find it interesting that Mike screws up Chicago 2 times, not once, but twice. It's obviously something he had a block about, because he went, now you're not in Chicago, right? Right, I'm not in Chicago. Okay, so if you're not in St. Louis or Chicago, and they did not retake it. They kept it in. And in a way, it works, because he wouldn't be as smooth as Bud, with this. He's just learning it. So why not, right? And of course, it turns around on him with Lou. Anyway, before that bit was the bit that I think every critic mentions as the highlight of the film and the biggest laugh getter in the film. And that's, it's a variation on Pack and Unpack, which they did in Here Come the Coeds.
Yes.
But this is just Lou taking off and putting on his pants over and over and over again as Bud changes his mind. Bud is telling him, we've got to get out of town. This is ridiculous. We can't. The gangsters are after us. We owe money. Put on your pants. So he puts on his pants. And then, but why are we running away? Why are we scared? We shouldn't be scared. They have records. We could take off your pants. So Lou takes off his pants. In other words, he puts on his pants and takes off his pants, probably more than Errol Flynn ever did in his entire life. And that's a lot. So, but that's it. That's the put on your pants, take off your pants. Mm-hmm. And that leads into You're Not Here. So you've got 2 great burlesque routines in a row without taking a breath in between. That's our friend, John Grant. Thank you, John Grant. So, okay. The next morning comes and Lou is having his breakfast. And what's his breakfast? Pickles and milk. He
Oh.
loves he dips the dill pickles into a glass of milk and eats the pickles. He repeats that in the television show as well.
Yeah.
That's he's making everyone sick around him. And finally, the mail comes, and there it is. There's the advertisement. Unfortunately, it all went wrong. As Lou put the money in the little envelope, he sets it down for a second and turns around, and one of the ladies working the conveyor belt grabs it, sticks it in an envelope, and addresses it to some random person. And Lou turns around and sees the new one there, which is full of powder, and he puts it in the larger envelope and addresses it to Nick Craig. Okay, so Nick Craig gets that envelope with only the powder in it, and he's not happy. He's not happy about it. And this is where you can understand what this poor guy is going through, just because he trusted these two guys. So here's what happens. They're threatened. It's like Nick Craig only has till midnight to get this money, or else J.C. McBride, who he owes the money to, will turn him over to the district attorney, and he does not want that. So Bud and Lou really have to find this money. So they get the idea, Bud gets the idea of getting the list of people who are getting the advertisement mail. So they go to the office. Nick tells them, go ahead, do it. That makes sense. They go to the office, and the guy won't give them the list. And, no, this is very exclusive. We pay a lot of money for this kind of thing. Blah, 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 blah. So Lou, and this is kind of a change in Lou's character.
Yes.
He doesn't even confer with Bud. He just faints. He goes into, and he faints. And the man gets up and he's concerned and he's trying to, get him to wake up. And Bud goes over and grabs the list and starts fanning Lou with it. And Lou starts coming around, and eventually they leave with the list.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that interesting. That was Lou's idea. So anyway, they get the list, and one of my favorite scenes comes up, and it's so stupid and so simple and so old, but it doesn't matter. It just makes me laugh. They decide to split up the list so they can go see everybody on it. And the list is 20 pages. So Bud decides to split it up. And how does he split it up? Okay, here we go. 1 for me, 1 for you. 2 for me, 1, 2 for you. 3 for me, 1, 2, 3 for you. And it goes up like that until Lou has 15 pages and Bud only has 5. So anyway, this is their time to go out and look. By the way, I just wanted to mention real quick before I forget, Howard W. Koch, the famous producer from the 60s and 70s that we grew up with. I mean, Manchurian Candidate, The Odd Couple. Mm-hmm. He was the assistant director on this movie. And also in charge of breaking up the card games between Bud and Lou so they could go back to work. And he would always remind them that this is your money. So they had to get back to work. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that before I forgot. And then we meet our leading lady. And that's a lady who's kind of familiar to people who enjoy films from mostly the 50s. And I'm talking about some films, let me tell you. We'll get to that in a minute. Her name is Kathy Downs. Now, Kathy Downs was born in 1926 in Port Jefferson, New York, Long Island, my home. And she didn't live very long. She passed away in 1976 at the age of 50. She had cancer. But anyway, she was a model with the Walter Thornton Agency. In 1944, she got called to Hollywood by 20th Century Fox. She had very tiny, uncredited roles in movies like State Fair and the Dolly Sisters. But she eventually played the title role in My Darling Clementine, John Ford's great movie with Henry Fonda and Victor Mature. She was also great as the unfaithful wife of Clifton Webb in a movie, a film noir called The Dark Corner, in 1946. One of my favorites, actually. William Bendix also is just great in it. And you could tell why she was unfaithful. She was married to Clifton Webb. I'll just leave that there. I don't think she got much action. So Fox dropped her in 1947. She got back up and walked away. She was never again with a major studio. But she married Joe Kirkwood Jr. in 1949, and he was known as Joe Palooka in the Joe Palooka series at Monogram. One of our other co-stars in this movie was played Nobby Walsh in those movies. We'll get to that later. She played Anne Howe, his girlfriend, Joe Palooka's girlfriend, in a one-season TV show from 1954 called The Joe Palooka Story. And eventually she kind of drifted into real dreck, like The Amazing Colossal Man, which was the sequel to The Colossal Man. Suddenly he became more amazing.
Yeah.
She was also in one of the probably worst science fiction films of the 1950s, but one of the funniest, and that's Missile to the Moon. If you ever get the chance, even if you watch it with riff tracks or Mystery Science Theater 3000, Missile to the Moon. I once saw it on the big screen at USC during a 24-hour bad movie festival. Yeah. And how did I get through it? I was on LSD. And it was the only way you could get through something like that. Yeah, I know. And my checkered past. Okay, so that's Kathy Downs. And she's the assistant to a very snobby lady who we met in Ride 'em Cowboy. Mm-hmm. She also played a snobby lady. Isabel Randolph was that was her stock and trade. And so she plays Mrs. Van Cleve, and she's a rich lady, and her assistant gets this money in the mail in this advertisement, $50,000. And she puts it back in the envelope. She's not quite sure what to do. She goes to Mrs. Van Cleve and says, Mrs. Van Cleve, this ad came for you. And she immediately dismisses it. I don't want ads. I don't take those things. That's for lower class people, blah, 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 blah. So in the meantime, she pretty much just gives her the $50,000 without knowing it. And before you know it, Bud and Lou finally arrive at Mrs. Van Cleve's house because she was on the list. And she says, oh, no, I didn't receive that. I gave it to my assistant, which is interesting because she quit this job and suddenly moved down the hallway in this building. And, you know, she seems to have a lot of money all of a sudden. And that's all they needed to hear. Mm-hmm. And they run to her apartment. And actually, they run into her first and knock over all her packages. She's out shopping, no doubt. And I found this interesting, too, as a slight change. As they were helping her with the packages, it's Lou that has the little package and Bud that has the armful of stuff.
Yes.
You know? They were doing some different stuff here.
Yep.
So I just found that interesting. And Lou and he even uses the Bud thing. You know, my hand is full, you know, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so they find out, and this kills me. In fact, when I first saw the film, it hurt my heart to hear this. She spent $48,000 and only has $2,000 left. And that's in a very short amount of time. Mm-hmm. There's the apartment. She bought a new car. She has a fur coat. She has jewelry. I mean, she just went out and it was a spree. Now, it hurt me because I'm thinking to myself, $50,000 at that time, she could put it in the bank and just retire. You know, yes. But instead she goes out and spends it all. So, okay, the guys find out, they're panicky, they're not sure what to do. Nick shows up with the boys to threaten them again and tell them that they have a little more time, but they've got to do this. So again, they come up with an idea. They hear that J.C. McBride, the guy Nick owes the money to, is a guy who never loses. And they hear him make a bet on a horse called Lolly C, which was actually a horse owned by Lou Costello, named after his mother, in fact, Lolly Costello. He named a horse after his mother. Anyway, kind of weird. So they decide, let's put the full $2,000 on Lolly C. She's 30-1, and we'll make $60,000. You know, we'll have $10,000 more after we pay Nick off. So they decide to do that. And they go to a very interesting club.
Yeah.
The television club.
Yeah, I wasn't even aware a place like that existed, you know?
And it's commonplace now. You go to a place and there's like a TV in every corner. And that's what this was. And TVs were not rampant in 1947 when they shot this. Yeah. It was released in 1948. But anyway, so they go to the television club, and the televisions are everywhere so that people can watch the races and keep up. It's a betting place. It's like a legal betting parlor. Mm-hmm. So they go, and they're going to make the $2,000 bet, and they do for Lolly C. Although, okay, Bud makes the fatal mistake, like he always does, sending Lou to do what Bud should be doing, basically. Bud is just too lazy and a little stupid, you know? It's like, and then he turns around and he's surprised when things go wrong. But anyway, he sends Lou to check everything out to make sure everything's kosher. First thing Lou does is buy yesterday's racing form, because the guy tells him it's all winners. You have all the winners because it was yesterday. So he buys it for $1 and only realizes later that he made a fool of himself. So he's walking around trying to sell this to somebody else. And who does he meet? J.C. McBride. And now he tells him that his name is Julius Caesar. So that's the J.C. And Lou tells him his name is Brutus. And he thinks, you know, the guy's crazy. So what happens here? They end up doing the mutter fodder bit that they did in It Ain't Hay. But in It Ain't Hay, they cut it into 3 sections.
Yeah.
It was done in 3 different sections, and it wasn't as effective as it is here. And the other reason is he's working with a classic master comedian by the name of Leon Errol. Now, let's talk about Leon. Now, I don't know about you, Jerry, but I loved the two of them working together. I just thought it was natural. It was completely natural. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure, you know, Leon did some of those routines years and years before Bud and Lou. So it must have been interesting for him to, you know, see it again. He's from Australia, from Sydney, Australia. He was born in 1881. His real name is Leon Errol Sims, S-I-M-S. Changed it to Leon Errol. And he actually studied medicine in Sydney. I wonder if he ran into Mike Mazurki. He was studying law. 2 things, two unlikely things you're bound to find. So anyway, while he was in college at the University of Sydney, he wrote, directed, and acted in some of the university shows, and that changed his focus. He left school and got into show business. So soon he was touring Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain, in circuses, burlesque houses. He did Shakespeare, operettas. I mean, he really got his education under fire, you might say. Came to America in 1905 to Portland, Oregon. And he managed a vaudeville troupe there and featuring and encouraging a young Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle. Ah. Yeah. He saw the talent right away and encouraged him. In 1911, he heard from Ziegfeld, not Ziegfeld. You know, more people say Ziegfeld than say the proper way. It makes me crazy. It's Ziegfeld. So he called him into the Ziegfeld Follies, where he was until 1915, doing each year, working with people like W.C. Fields, Burt Williams, Fanny Brice, Eddie Cantor, Ed Wynn, and a couple of these guys he met up with later in life and got to work with again. And then eventually he just started doing Broadway shows. He did another one, a book show for Ziegfeld called Sally with Marilyn Miller, Ziegfeld's dancing star. And he eventually did that they made a silent version that he starred and co-starred in called Sally. He did about a dozen Broadway shows, ended up playing the Palace in 1920. He used to do a routine, and I think it's on YouTube, where he's completely bombed. He's completely drunk. Nobody did a better drunk than Leon Errol. Even Chaplin, I think, was second to Leon Errol as a drunk. He does a routine called Mailing a Letter. And all it is him trying to mail a letter into the postal box. And I'm not going to say anything more about it because it's pantomime that is just, it's nirvana. It's just wonderful. Also, I just want to say, and you can make a note of this, there's a short he made in, I believe it was 1938 at RKO called The Jitters. And it has some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen in a two-reeler. So I'm just going to put it out there. It's called The Jitters. And the second half is better than the first half, so stick with it. So his first film was in 1916, a movie called Nearly Spliced. But he was still doing theater. That was a novelty for him. Went to Hollywood permanently in 1925, where he did Sally and all that. By 1931, he was already a staple in Hollywood. Worked with W.C. Fields again in a movie called Her Majesty Love in 1931. He also made the first live-action 3-strip Technicolor film It was a short film called Service with a Smile, and it's absolutely gorgeous. The colors are stunning. And he made another one immediately afterwards in 3-strip Technicolor called Good Morning Eve. And it's a spoof on Adam and Eve. But the thing to watch, and if you could look this one up also, I'm telling all my friends out there, it's called Good Morning Eve. And Vernon Dent, the great Vernon Dent from the great, Three Stooges films and the Columbia short films, he actually has his own solo as a singer, and he's fantastic. He plays like old King Cole, and he sings a song called Putting the Fiddle to the Bow, and it's so, so good. So if you love Vernon Dent, and I know we all do, check that out, Good Morning Eve. So he found a home, not only at Universal. Leon did movies for Universal in the 40s, but he was under contract to RKO. Not only did he have an almost 20-year career doing short films for RKO, much like the Stooges did for Columbia, and with his leading lady, usually the great Dorothy Granger, was always his suspicious wife, because Leon was always in trouble with some blonde. But he made a series of films with the great Lupe Velez, the Mexican Spitfire films. Yep. It was a series. Began in 1939 and went all the way into 1943. Lupe passed away. In fact, she committed suicide. But Leon created a character called Lord Epping. And he shows up in every Mexican Spitfire film, except the first one, which is why the first one is not my favorite. But Lord Epping will make you laugh out loud, and I promise you, you will. You will laugh out loud. It's one of the funniest characters in film history. He lifts his shoulders level with his ears and walks around that way. That's stiff, like a penguin almost. And of course, he's the silly-ass old British guy with a mustache and whatever. He's very, very funny. And basically the main reason to watch those films, because they all bleed together. I can't tell one from the other. Yeah. He also played Nobby Walsh, as I mentioned, Joe Palooka's manager in 8 of those Monogram films. He worked with W.C. Fields again in Never Give a Sucker an Even Break, but is suspiciously cut. His role is very, very small, and I think there was a lot more there that met the eye. And then this is what kills me. He did an Ed Wynn show. Ed Wynn had a live television show. In fact, it was the first variety show to be broadcast from Los Angeles. And he had Leon on his show, live, the two of them. And it's not available. I can't find it anywhere, and I would kill to find it. Anyway, that's the frustration I deal with. So yeah, he had quite a career, and he was one of the classic comedians. They were talking about Dorothy Granger and Leon, according to Leonard Maltin's great movie shorts book, which is a wonderful book. Mm-hmm. They were thinking about television, making it a television series, Leon and Dorothy. Wow. And he passed away from a heart attack at the age of 70. So he never got to do that. But he's in this movie, boy. Boy, is he in this movie.
One of the great things growing up in the Boston area, in addition to having Abbott and Costello on TV every Saturday night, we had one of our local stations would rotate between the Leon Errol and Edgar Kennedy shorts.
Oh, boy.
RKO. Yeah. So we had a full dose of that as well. And Leon Errol.
Fantastic.
Leon Errol, my goodness. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I agree with you. Again, nobody did the wobbly legs like him, the drunken walk and all that. He was just amazing. And you could tell he and Lou got along like a house of fire. They were just fantastic together. There's a scene in the movie where he comes over to tell them, don't bet on Lolly C. I changed my mind. Now it's Lucky George. And Bud is like, they don't know this is J.C. McBride. They don't know it's him. So they slough him off. Bud is so mean in this scene. I have to say, this guy's trying to help him, and Bud doesn't even look at him. He says, you know what, just get out of here. I've dealt with people like you before. Get out of here. And he goes, no, well, here's my card. He gives him his card. Bud doesn't even look at it. He rips it in half and throws it on the table. He didn't mind coming off as mean. And boy, he's really mean in this. So anyway, they bet on the wrong horse. They lose their $2,000. So Bud and Lou realize that if they leave Kathy Downs with Leon Errol, she'll be fine, but they have to get themselves arrested so they're safe in jail and away from Nick and his boys so they won't get beat up or killed or whatever it is they're going to be. So right away, John Grant is saying, yeah, getting arrested. Yeah, that's a burlesque routine. Sure, that worked. So again, here's an excuse to do the old chestnut getting arrested. And it's really funny. The basic thing is Lou has to do something to get them put in jail. So Bud comes up with an idea, go insult that woman. And then she'll get upset and they'll arrest you. They'll take you away. So he goes over and he says, hiya, Toots. And she's like, how did you know my name was Toots? How did you know? Are you with the boys? And she's a gangster. She's basically no better than Nick and his boys, you know? Now, this was supposed to be a different gag, and it was cut out by the censors. Lou was going to go up and say, hiya, Toots. And the lady was going to turn around and in a man's voice, what are you talking about? What are you... Blah, 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 blah. And the punchline would be, Bud says, well, what happened? And Lou says, she was one of the boys. And it was a transvestite joke. And they took it out. So in other words, all they had to do was change it to a woman's voice and a woman, and it was fine. He says, yeah, she was one of the boys, meaning that she was a gangster too.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was the first time. So they fail miserably. And then Bud says, listen, there's a guy with an overcoat. Go steal his overcoat. So Lou goes over and he grabs the overcoat, and the guy turns around panicky and says, please, mister, I didn't know it was yours. I took it because I'm cold and I have a family and children and blah, 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 blah. And Lou feels sorry for him and gives him the coat back, and the guy walks off. Again, failure number 2. And then finally, Lou gets the idea. They're standing in front of a jewelry shop with a big window in front, and he picks up 2 wrenches from a truck that's parked on the street, and he's getting ready to throw them at the window. But who walks up but a cop? And he tells the cop to just wait here because there's going to be something here for you in a minute. And the cop is the great Fred Kelsey, who played cops probably more times than anyone else in Hollywood history. In fact, Tex Avery used him as a character in one of his cartoons, playing a detective, because he always played that role. Yeah. So he shows up in this cartoon. It's great. So anyway, Lou throws the wrenches at the window. The window explodes in shards of glass, and the cop comes over and is going to take the both of them away until the owner of the jewelry store, rotund Paul Maxey, really, really fun actor, comes out with the guy who just sold him shatterproof glass. It's supposed to be shatterproof. And Lou heroically proved that he was being taken. So the guy thanked them and sent the other guy to jail. So Bud and Lou are not in jail again. So finally, Bud comes up with the idea. We're going to go to the Copper Club, which is the fanciest restaurant in town. We're going to order everything on the menu 3 times, and we're not going to pay for it. And that'll put us away. Okay. So they all meet up at the Copper Club. Kathy Downs and Leon go to, there's a bar that has an aquarium above it, and you could bet on the fish, like races. So they go and they're doing that. So they're occupied. Bud and Lou sit down at the table, and it's just the 2 of them at this banquet table, you know, and they just ordered everything on the menu. And while they're waiting, John Grant had an explosion in his head. I'm going to take like 6 burlesque routines and tie them together. And in 7 minutes or whatever it is, I think it's like 6.5, 7 minutes, they are going to do every one of those routines while sitting here at this restaurant table. Now, you would think that would be a static scene. It might be dull. It might be whatever. It is a lesson in not only acting, but burlesque comedy and timing. It is just gorgeous. It's a scene that I show to my classes when I do the history of film comedy or even the history of Bud and Lou. It always gets huge laughs. And, you know, what do, Jerry? They do Hole in the Wall.
They do Hole in the Wall. They do Mustard. They do, you're 40 and she's 10.
They take an aspirin. I've got a headache. Take an aspirin. I love when Lou says, why don't you take a bromo zelza? Bromo zelza. He's so funny. So anyway, they do these routines, and I'm very tempted to play this entire segment for our audience because it's just perfect. If you know it too well, you could fast forward through it. But for the uninitiated, I want you to hear just how brilliant these 2 comedians are.
This is really a gorgeous place.
Wonderful.
Look at that wall over there.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that a beautiful wall?
Beautiful.
You know what that wall reminds me of?
What?
This one over here.
Oh, stop. Walls are walls. Suppose you walked over there and you bored a hole in that wall.
Okay, I walk over there and I bore a hole in the wall.
Why? Why should you go over there and bore a hole in that wall?
I'm not boring a hole in the wall.
Why should you go over there and bore a hole in that wall?
Look, Ted, you said to me, suppose you walk over there and bore a hole in the wall. I was dopey enough to say I'll go and bore a hole in the wall, but you're not gonna put that blame on me.
That makes no difference.
I don't go around boring holes in walls in restaurants.
That's what I want to know.
If I want to get out of here, I don't have to get out through a hole in the wall.
You see that?
They got exite here if I want to get out.
Exite?
Mm-hmm. E-exite-T out.
What makes you so dumb?
Oh, it just comes to me naturally.
Sure. Suppose you walk into a baseball field. What teams are playing?
I don't know.
Then what are you doing in that baseball field?
I don't know. You got me in here and I'll get me out.
Look, what is the first thing you buy in a baseball field?
A hot dog?
A hot dog.
Without mustard?
Mustard goes with a hot dog.
Not with mine.
Mustard was made for the hot dog.
Now, but look, I don't like mustard.
Mustard and the hot dog go together.
Let them go together. I don't want to spoil any romance.
Do you know they spend millions of dollars every year to put up factories just to manufacture mustard? Do you know those factories employ thousands and thousands of men just to manufacture mustard? Do you know those men take care of thousands of families and homes, all on account of mustard? And you, just because you don't like mustard, what do you want them to do? Close those factories down and put all those people out of work?
You mean to sit there and tell me just because I don't eat mustard, I'm going to close down the mustard factory?
No, wait a minute. No.
Are you trying to tell me that those thousands of people are making one little jar of mustard like this just for me?
Now, wait a minute. You don't
Well,
understand.
if they are, you can tell them not to make any more because I'm not going to eat it.
All right, so you don't like it.
I like Worcestershire sheer shorts.
You like what?
Worcestershire sheer shorts.
Worcestershire shorts.
You can't even share it. But I don't
You
go
don't-
for mustard.
you don't like
No.
mustard, huh?
I don't like it. No, I like Worcestershire sheer shorts.
You don't know why you dislike it.
Look, I'm not going to put nobody out of work. I told you before, I don't put nobody out of work.
All right, forget about it.
Okay.
Sit here like a big dummy. I don't know why I hang around with you. You can't answer a question.
You said that I was putting thousands of people out
That's
of work.
what you're doing.
I'm not putting anybody out of work.
Men walking the streets, husbands walking the streets, doing nothing.
I'm not putting any husbands out of work.
You don't even know what a husband is.
A husband is what's left of a sweetheart after the nerve has been killed.
Listen, no remarks out of you. Ask you simple little questions and you say nothing at all.
Why don't you ask me a little easy question?
Will you answer it?
A tiny one.
So, suppose you had $5 in one pants pocket and $10 in the other pants pocket. What would you have?
Somebody else's pants on.
Yeah, you see, you want to
I
answer
ain't
the
got
question.
no money. What do you ask me those kind
I'm
of
not
things?
asking you
Well,
that.
don't yell at me.
It's only simple. Quiet.
That's
Look
all right.
here. Say you're 40 years old. Now, wait a minute, just a minute.
Who's 40?
Just say, pretend you're
I'm
40.
a boy.
All right. Pretend
I'm
you're...
a little boy.
All right, wait a minute. Look, pretend
I'm
you're...
not 40.
Pretend you're 40 years old. And you're in love with a little girl, say, 10 years old.
This one's gonna be a pip.
Well, now, wait a minute. I finish it.
Now, I'm going around with a 10-year-old girl.
Well, wait a minute.
You got a good idea where I'm gonna wind up.
Will you wait a minute, please? Now, you're 40. She's 10. You're 4 times as old as that girl. Now, you couldn't marry her, could you?
Not unless I come from the mountains.
Never mind that. I'm asking you one little simple question. You want to answer it?
Oh, go ahead.
You're 40. She's 10. You're 4 times as old as that girl. Can't marry her, so you wait. Oh, you wait 5 years.
I'll wait 5 minutes.
Now you're 45. The little girl is 15. Now you're only 3 times as old as that little girl, right? Huh? So you wait 15 years more. Now the little girl is 30, you're 60. Now you're only twice as old as that little girl.
She's catching up.
Yes. Now here's the question. How long do you have to wait before you and the little girl are the same age? Now go ahead. Now there's a very simple question. Think hard.
I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous.
What's ridiculous
I mean, if
about
I keep waiting for that girl, she'll pass me up.
What do you mean?
She'll wind up older than I am.
What are you talking
And
about?
she'll have to wait for me.
Why should she wait for you?
I was nice enough to wait for her.
Oh, stop.
She thinks she is anyway. If she don't want to wait for me, I don't have to marry her.
Marry her.
If she's a nice girl. I'll
Wait a
marry her.
minute. Do you know this girl?
No.
Then why should you marry a girl you don't even know?
I asked you to ask me a simple one, didn't I? A little one.
All right, here.
Now,
Take it easy. Take it easy. You're going to jail fast enough. Don't get excited.
ask me a
All right,
simple one.
simple. Every time I talk to you, I
Ask
get
me
a
that
headache.
question slow again.
Headaches is all I get when I talk
Why
to
don't you
you.
take aspirin?
Take an aspirin. You're telling me to take an aspirin?
That's good for a headache.
Have you a license to practice medicine? Huh? Have you a license to practice medicine? Doctors all over the world, they study, they spend their lives to go to college to become doctors. And you tell me to take an aspirin.
When one friend has a headache, another friend tells him to take aspirin. That's all. It's a simple little thing.
You have no business.
Don't take the aspirin.
Oh, I should go around with a headache, huh? There's a fine pal.
Why don't you
Fine.
take a little bromozilzer?
Never mind, I'll take what I want. Here. Say you're in the Grand Central Station, New York City. Right? Will you stop that, please? Put it down. You're in the Grand Central Station.
Yeah.
You buy a ticket. Where are you going?
I'm not going anywhere.
What are you buying a ticket for?
I'm not buying any ticket.
And what are you doing in the depot? Well, you are, you see.
Same as the baseball game. Now you got me in a depot.
What am I doing in a depot? What are you blaming me for all these things? Well, then you know where you were going when you went in?
I don't know. You put me in this station.
Don't blame everything on me.
Now that I'm there, I'll have to find some place to go.
Find some place to go.
I'll go bye-bye.
Where's Bye-Bye?
Where's bye-bye?
Where is Bye-Bye?
Over that way someplace.
What's over there?
Bye-bye.
Oh, stop. Will you please talk sense?
I'll go to Baltimore. I don't want to go, but I'll go.
Baltimore?
That'll set
Why
that.
Baltimore? Why did you have to pick out Baltimore? Of all the towns in the United States, why did you have to pick out Baltimore? What's the matter with Philadelphia?
I got friends in Baltimore.
Suppose you had friends in Philadelphia.
Then I go to Philadelphia.
And what happened to your friends in Baltimore?
I'm not talking to them anymore.
Suppose you were married, had a wife, and your wife was in Philadelphia.
Then I go to Chicago.
Oh, go ahead, eat your shrimp. Go ahead, eat it and get it over with.
Don't push it into my mouth.
Okay, so that is definitely,
Wow.
if not the highlight of the movie, one of the highlights of the movie, and it kind of leaves you breathless. So here's the deal. They tell the manager of the restaurant, played by the great Russell Hicks, who was in Hold That Ghost and a few others of their earlier films, and he tells them that they're going to be arrested because they can't pay their check, and they're dragging them out, and Lou grabs a piece of bread off the table before being led out, and he takes a little bite of it and he puts it in his pocket. Now, this is something I didn't notice until maybe the third or fourth time that I've seen the movie, because there's no close-up. It's just Lou grabbing a piece of bread, very innocuously, taking a bite and putting it in his pocket. Okay, so they meet Nick and the boys at the door, and Nick tells Russell Hicks, I'll take it from here. Don't worry about it. If you run into Kathy Downs, tell her that I'm taking them to the state cement and gravel company, or whatever it was. It was a cement company, basically.
Yeah.
So it was time for them to lose their lives, I guess. So he takes them out, and we cut back to the aquarium bar, where we learn that J.C. McBride, who is Leon Errol, can lose. And he's lost $50,000 to Kathy Downs during these fish races. So he hands her the money, and she's like, oh my God, I can't believe it. This is the answer to all of our problems. So they go, and the manager tells them that Nick took the boys to the cement place, and they have to get there as soon as possible because they may be too late. So the boys, much like Laurel and Hardy in Our Relations, have these gangsters put their feet in cement. He tells them that we want to take your shoe size, so we're going to put them in cement. Leon and Kathy Downs show up, and they do this wonderful thing where Kathy Downs hands the money to Bud and Lou. Bud and Lou hand it to Joe Calleia, or Nick Craig, and Nick Craig hands it to Leon Errol, who he owes it to originally. Unfortunately, the bet he made on Lucky George is also owed. It's another $10,000. And of course, Nick doesn't have the money, and he's put in the position now that Bud and Lou were put in. And Bud and Lou decide, you know what? We're going to let this go and blah, blah, blah. But we want your shoe size. And they push the three bad guys into the cement, and it gets their butts, their rear ends, not their shoe size. I think Lou says something like, well, that'll do, But here's what you have to look for, folks. And again, you don't get this anywhere else. When they push the villains into the cement, Joe Calleia's hat comes up, and you see his toupee come up and his baldness just for a split second. At least it wasn't Bud this time,
Yeah.
So, it was Joe Calleia. So anyway, the gangsters are humiliated, and this is the weird thing for me with this movie. While Bud and Leon Errol are shaking hands and they're very happy, all of a sudden Kathy Downs walks up to Lou and says, oh, you're my hero, and gives him a kiss, that Rhett Butler gives to Scarlett O'Hara. It's like, that they did in Wuthering Heights, that kind of a kiss.
Yep.
And it's like, nothing built up to that. There was no indication. I mean, you could see Lou looked at her a few times like, boy, she's pretty, but there was no indication that there was an attraction or anything like that. And this is why. They were just leading up to a gag that they had already done in Keep 'Em Flying with Martha Ray, where she's kissing him and the bread that he had taken from the restaurant turns to toast in his hands. Now, it's a great gag, no doubt. you know, but boy, talk about being pasted on, you know. And that is the end of the film. And I have to say, they are on a winning streak. I mean, from Wistful Widow of Wagon Gap to this one, and then the next one coming up, probably their best film of all time. They were on fire. They were just on fire. And the boys at this point were still making money for Universal. So Universal kept them on and gave them that great contract. Yeah. And they got to make an independent film every year at this point. So this was their independent film. The first one, and I think the last one for Abbott and Costello Productions. But a lot of fun. So what do you think of this one overall, Jer?
Oh, I'm in full agreement. I think it's one of their best. And again, we've had this discussion back in the early days of the podcast as far as the early Universal films with the balance of music and comedy, and how sometimes it felt like Bud and Lou were just the comedic relief in the film as opposed to the stars of the film. Right. And when they made that shift to pretty much letting them carry the entire film, you know, it was a change of pace. Yeah. But of that, from then till now, I would put Noose Hangs High as one of, if not the best of their films.
I agree with you. I think the plot works beautifully for them.
Yes.
Probably even better than the original film itself in 1939, which I'm still going to look for. And if I find it, I'll let you know, Jared.
Yes.
But it's one of the most, you know, it's funny. Matthew Conium in our book, I wrote the chapter for this one. But, you know, at the end of every chapter, we get to write our own assessment of the film. And Matthew writes that he finds it's very difficult to follow. He thinks it doesn't make much sense, and that the plot is, you know, it's very choppy. And I find the opposite. Yeah. I think it's very easy to understand. It's a very simple plot in a way, and I don't see it choppy at all, you know? So I don't know. That's kind of weird. But unless Matthew someday wants to come on this podcast, and he really hasn't shown much interest, we're going to keep talking about him behind his back. And that's sorry about that, Matthew. Actually, I'd love to have him on our Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein one, because he's the one dissenter about that film. It is not his favorite Abbott and Costello movie. Okay, I'm going to make this announcement before we wrap things up.
Yes. I
wanted to make the next episode number 23, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. I think you've heard of it. I wanted to make it a two-parter. And here's what I meant to do. We would do our normal podcast about it, just Jerry and I, and then, or is it Jerry and me? And yes. And then eventually do the next one, episode number 24, I would like to have people talk about Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. And I mean people that are fans, people maybe that don't like it as much. I just want to have an open conversation about the film itself. That's not just Jerry and I or me. Okay? So if you are interested in that, please write to me. I guess you could write on the YouTube commentary there. If not, my email is NSM, that's Nick Santamaria, NSM555@msn.com. Write to me there, and we'll either talk about what you write about, if you don't want to be part of the broadcast or the podcast, or let me know if you're interested, and I will contact you, and you'll be part of the discussion. Okay? So that's my big plan for Bud and Lou Meet the Big Ragu. So anyway, that was fun. That was a lot of fun. Yeah. It was a lot of fun watching it, actually, last night. I really had a good time watching it. It's a funny movie. But it's not just a funny movie. It's a compelling movie. It's a strong plotted movie. So you'll be drawn in, I promise you. And there's some burlesque routines that are just irreplaceable, and you're going to love them. So that's my endorsement. And Jerry, I'd have to say once again that this is always the highlight of my 2 weeks is to get together with you and discuss the stuff we love.
And for me as well. It's always a thrill and a pleasure to take something that you find to be wonderful and to find somebody else who also finds it to be wonderful, and just, be wonderful together.
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
It really is. It's full
wonderful.
of wonder. It's
Marvelous.
wonderful. It's marvelous that you should care for my cat. I have no idea. I have no
Right.
idea. I'm really, really, I'm tired.
Yeah.
So what, okay. So,
Time to go.
yeah, I would say there was one other thing I wanted to say and I can't think of it now. That's bad. That's very, very bad. Okay. It doesn't matter. We'll get to it when we return, and get ready, because we are going to be talking about the movie they are best remembered by, and the best horror comedy ever made, bar none. And we're going to have a ball talking about that. It might be a long one. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I could talk about this movie all day, and I might. So,
Okay.
Jerry, we will see you soon. And my
Yes.
best to you and your family.
And to you and your mom as well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And ladies and gentlemen, you're Abbott and Costello fans. And guys and gals, we will see you in a couple of weeks with Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.